Artificial sweeteners. What's the story with those, Brad?
Well, the story is it's confusing. There's a lot of claims on both sides, good, bad, the ugly. We're going to try to break down a little bit about the details behind them and leave a conclusion to the end and say, this one might be a little more concerning than some of the other types.
Why'd you look at me when you said the ugly? I'm offended by that.
I didn't do that.
You did. You said the good, the bad, the ugly.
I did not.
Welcome to Talking with Docs. I'm Dr. Paul Zalzal.
I'm Dr. Brad Winning.
And we're going to talk about artificial sweeteners, okay? These are also known as non-nutritive sweeteners.
Yes, that reminds me of that scene from Christmas Vacation.
Yes.
Where Clark Griswold uses the non-nutritive cereal varnish on his snow device to go sledding.
On his sled there. He really goes. That really gives him a kick.
Yeah.
I think it's tough to get that non-nutritive label.
Yeah.
You're coming right out and saying this has absolutely no nutritive value.
Right. Okay? No benefit and arguably no calories, depending.
I mean, just about everything we eat has some sort of nutritional value.
We don't care about nutrition.
Yeah, this is clearly not. We've gone out of our way to make this non-nutritive.
Yes.
It's non-medicinal, but it's non-nutritive.
Okay.
Okay, so what's the deal? What are we trying to replace with these artificial sweeteners?
I think usually it's sugar, and I'd say the impetus for their design was to try to allow people to enjoy something that's sweet, which we all have receptors on our tongue and taste buds that like sweet, to replace the sweet with something that doesn't have calories to reduce our chances of increasing our weight and developing obesity.
Right. And we are always, saying we don't want you to get too much sugar.
Right.
But sugar, or glucose, for example, a type of sugar, is very, very important.
Yes.
Right? Can we live without it?
We cannot.
We can't live without it, but we can't live with too much of it.
Right. I would also argue that a lot of disease is actually not specifically caused by sugar. I think sugar almost gets a little bit of a bad rap because most people are not adding like tablespoons, tons of added sugar. Obviously that is not a good idea, but most of our disease is not necessarily related specifically to like sugar per se.
Right, and we need sugar because that is how we get energy,
right.
Okay? So glucose, for example, a type of sugar is a monosaccharide.
Yep.
These are carbohydrates, so they have carbon and hydrogen. The formula for glucose is C6H12O6, right? That is sugar. Our body takes that in and uses that to create energy in our cells, the energy that we need,
right.
Okay? The problem is if you get too much of these monosaccharides or these simple carbohydrates, your glycemic index, right, which you like to talk about a lot.
A little bit, yeah.
Goes way up.
Spikes,
That's just how fast the glucose in your blood goes up.
When you sweet your blood is.
Right? That's not good.
Not good.
We don't like it when it shoots up like that, but we do need the sugar, but it's better to get it in the form of a complex carbohydrate or these polysaccharides. Right. And that's in starches, for example, things like that have the sugars in them, but your body has to break it down to get the sugar out.
So it kind of blunts that response. So it's more like a hill than like a really sharp peak.
Exactly. And it's got other nutritive substances in the food mixed in with it. So it's balanced when you eat it.
Like fiber. We talk about this all the time.
Fiber, for example. So that's why we don't like you just eating a tablespoon of sugar to get your energy.
Right. And the disease that we're mostly talking about is obviously diabetes, and not really the type 1 diabetes, but the type 2 diabetes, where our body becomes less responsive to insulin. Our receptors can't modulate the amount of glucose that we have in our bloodstream as well.
And then when you get this extra sugar, you convert it into fat as storage, right? If you don't burn it all up, which is virtually impossible to do, you end up storing it because our bodies are super efficient. Right?
Thankfully.
That takes us back to the days when food wasn't plentiful, or geographically in the world, there's parts of the world where food is not plentiful. So we need to be super efficient.
Right.
Unfortunately, our ability to create foods has exceeded evolution, and we've created a lot of foods that can be harmful before we've evolved to be able to not let them harm us.
Plus the universal access to food, like 24/7. We just have too much access, and that's why we're in the situation that we're in right now.
In many parts of the world.
Yes.
So that's the deal. We need sugar. You just need glucose. You need glucose to live. The problem is when you get it in these simple forms, it can be harmful. And I don't think it's just diabetes. I think it's also implicated in like
heart disease, high blood pressure, cancer, for sure.
Inflammation. And you know you need sugar to live because type 1 diabetes or like juvenile diabetes, one of the symptoms of that is weight loss. Because your body can't metabolize the sugar.
It's ironic.
Right?
Because you don't think of diabetics as having a problem with like losing weight.
But the type 1s who aren't producing the insulin that they require, their body's not using the glucose, so it's not even seeing the glucose, so they end up losing weight and it's dangerous. So you definitely need sugar. The problem is we're getting too much of the simple sugars
Yeah.
in our body. So that's why artificial sweeteners were created.
Okay, so go back to the beginning. So how did it all start? What did they do?
Artificial sweeteners?
Yeah, I think it was like aspartame. I think it was one of the first
first
ones,
ones,
right?
yeah.
Like even in the '60s, I think it was. And
Yeah.
and they studied it and they said, hey, this looks like it's safe. You know,
Sure.
it makes sense. You know,
Yeah.
we're gonna get rid of some sugar. We're gonna give you some no calorie sugar or something that's really really sweet, and then hopefully that's gonna alter your habits. And
Right, and aspartame is like 200 times sweeter than sugar, so you
Right.
don't need too much of it. And then that opened the floodgates. You've got aspartame, sucralose, ACE-K, stevia.
Yep.
You've got a bunch of them. And stick around to the end. We're going to talk about one that's hit the media recently
Okay.
that has some clinical evidence that could be really bad for you
okay,
at the end.
at the end.
Okay, so what's the deal with studying this kind of thing? Why can't we just make a study that says artificial sweeteners are good or bad?
So I think the challenge is a bunch of things. So, people that would choose to consume artificial sweeteners, I think, could be of two types of people. And this is not my ideas. Lots of people talk about this. It could be someone who already has a problem,
Okay.
has maybe an unhealthy lifestyle, and is choosing to consume
Okay.
artificial sweeteners to deal with the problem.
Right.
Or the other group of people could be someone who lives a healthy lifestyle and has been able to be healthy because of this choice and a whole bunch of other choices that kind of go in that group of maybe exercise, reducing calorie consumption, that kind of stuff. So you have two very different populations that would be examined in the same group of people potentially. That's my first concern.
So it's a heterogeneous population
Very.
using these things, so that's a tough way to study it. And that first group that has issues already or health challenges, they have confounding variables. You say, oh, look, it leads to heart disease. Well, that group might already have risk factors for heart disease, and that's why they're using the artificial sweeteners.
Right. So
Okay,
that's my first one.
that's
And the
a good
second
one.
one is it's really hard to measure how much you're taking in because honestly, these are everywhere.
Yeah.
So it's not just in the diet soda, which is kind of the number one culprit, I'd say, or the easily identifiable one, but it's everywhere to make things sweeter because our palate loves sweet.
That's a good point. So if you're going to do some sort of retrospective cross-sectional study, you're going to have a tough time identifying what people are taking in because they are in so many different foods. And then even if you try to do a randomized controlled trial, prospective, it's going to be tricky because it'd be hard to cut out all these types of chemicals while you're trying to do the study unless you put someone in a bubble for a while.
Because I read one study where they asked for volunteers that do not use sweeteners, and there's 1,500 people, and then they did a really detailed food journal, and like 85% of them were removed from the study because they unknowingly were consuming artificial sweeteners.
Okay, so we've got a heterogeneous population using these. They're in a bunch of different foods, and the other thing is there's so many different kinds of them,
Yeah.
right? There's like, I don't know, 10 or more different types, and so the same effects may not be present with each different one.
Agreed.
So it'd be very difficult to isolate one and see it clinically.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
But possibly in animal model you might be able to, or in sort of blood test studies you might be able to.
So what are the health concerns that people have about
Okay.
consumption of artificial sweeteners?
Okay, so the evidence. There has been some evidence to show that these can lead, these studies are not conclusive by any means.
For the reasons
but-
that we talked about.
Right. But one is, ironically, heart disease, stroke, myocardial infarction, that kind of stuff you're trying to avoid.
Yep.
There's some implication that these can contribute to that.
Okay, and evidence on both sides
Yeah.
shows that it does cause this, shows that there's no change or no
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cancer.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, there is some carcinogenic potential with some of these.
yeah.
So.
And
that's
again,
it.
it's hard to tease out exactly why these are related to cancer, and it may not be that, it may be some other lifestyle or food choice or whatever, but some of them have shown a trend towards that. Okay, so that's number two.
Gut microbe. It messes with the gut microbe. I
Yes.
mean, that one seems obvious to me.
And I would say I think that's one of the bigger concerns. I think it is really, really poorly understood. As much as there's more studies and more talk about the gut microbiome, we don't really get it, but it is a really big part of chronic disease for sure.
Metabolic effects.
Yes.
And the irony is it can make you gain weight.
Yes.
So we've designed some chemicals that are supposed to help you lose weight. One of the problems is they can make you gain weight.
Right.
Some studies have shown that too.
Yeah, you know what some people think is the cause of that is that people do the combo. They go out to eat, they get the combo, they get the double cheeseburger and the large fry,
Yeah,
but they get the diet soda.
makes sense to
And
me.
then people are kind of trading it off and saying, well,
Yeah.
I saved a couple hundred calories on the
Yeah.
pop or the soda I was going to get, so I'm going to indulge and maybe get the ice cream sundae for dessert.
Right. So It's a difficult thing to study.
It's
However, if you take a quick snapshot of the more recent studies that are out there, I think the majority of them say that they're probably harmful for you.
Yes.
Some of them say it's maybe harmful, inconclusive.
Yes.
And there's a small percentage of the studies that say, no, they're actually better for you than taking in sugar.
And I think I'd say the last group has the highest chance of having some inherent bias, like often sponsored by the makers of these products or people that want to find a result. Yeah, it's tricky.
And it may not be the same for everyone.
No.
There may be a subpopulation of people who do benefit from these. If you do have problems with glucose metabolism,
Yes.
that you may, and you have so many other risk factors that more sugar will increase your risk even more, they may benefit you in that situation.
I think that's a great point too, because we are all so different. Even if you take 10 people, put them on the same diet, you know, one person loses 20 pounds, one person gains 4 pounds, one person nothing happens. So there's so many variables when it comes to food and what we consume for sure.
And so what's your take on the average sort of healthy person, reasonably healthy person? Do use them or don't use them?
So should they use them or not use them? I think we should try to avoid things like this. I would say, generally speaking, from what I've read in the evidence, I don't think there's convincing, like, kind of damning evidence to say this is really, really dangerous for you. But I think there's the very nominal benefit, other than getting to taste something sweet.
Yeah, I would say play the moderation card.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing that I think we could talk about too, is that a lot of these studies talk about like attainable doses, right? So if you're someone who has like a diet pop like once a day, as opposed to someone who's having 6 or 8 or 10 or 12, I think those dosing regimens obviously can affect that. So in the normal recommended doses, I'd say, there's a higher chance that they're going to be safe. I think the benefit is limited, but I think the danger probably is limited too, unless you take too much.
Yeah, I agree. So now let's just talk about one that's hit the media recently. It's called erythritol. And you may have got this on your news feed on your phone or something, saying this is causing heart attack, stroke, death.
Right. Okay, so what's the background for this group of researchers?
There's a group of researchers from the Cleveland Clinic, and they have had some clinical studies and cross-sectional studies that said, hey, wait, it looks like this particular artificial sweetener is linked to increased risk of cardiovascular effects, heart attack, stroke, death.
Okay.
And then they did a recent study, I think it was published just in August. We'll put a little picture of it here. It's in the Arteriosclerosis, Thrombosis, and Vascular Biology. Did you get that journal?
I don't anymore.
Are you an editor of that? Really?
Yeah.
Well, I thought you were the centerfold. Yeah. Anyways, that study is called Ingestion of the Non-Nutritive Sweetener Erythritol, but not glucose, enhances platelet reactivity and thrombosis potential in healthy volunteers. Brief report. The title's not brief.
No.
So you've already lost me when you say, I don't believe you anymore when you say it's a brief report.
Okay, so what did they do?
So basically, they took 2 groups of 10 people.
Yep.
So 20 people.
Okay.
Did you get the math there?
So it's a small study.
Could you follow it?
Yep.
And they gave a bunch of them just glucose in water.
Okay.
And a bunch of them the artificial sweetener in water.
Were they blinded? Did people know if they were getting it or not?
No.
Not that it really matters.
No, it was a blinded study.
Okay.
And was it a blinded study? I think it was a blinded study, but it doesn't really matter in this particular type of study because they're
measuring something in their blood. They can't really be altered by what they think it's going to do.
Yeah, it's not like a patient-reported questionnaire or how you feel. We're just going to measure stuff in your blood.
Yep. And
we're going to measure some biochemical factors that indicate how likely your platelets are to aggregate or clot. Platelets are those things in your blood that cause clotting. It's good. We need them. If you cut yourself, you want to stop bleeding. However, those kind of clotting mechanisms can also be pathologic and clot your arteries, clot the arteries in your heart, give you a heart attack, clot the arteries in your brain, and give you a stroke. Okay? So you're sort of hypercoagulable because of this hyperplatelet aggravation situation that you get yourself in. So they took the people who took the glucose, people who took the artificial sweetener, and measured how likely their platelets were to clot.
What did they find?
They found that for sure, without a doubt, super high p-value, that the artificial sweetener led to increased platelet aggregation factors.
And how much increased compared to the control group?
Well, we can show this graph here.
Okay.
The main graph that shows the results. It's a little bit complicated, but if you look on the left, That's the artificial sweetener. On the right is the glucose, and the two different measures of platelet aggregation. And you can see in both situations, without a doubt, that it's quite a significant increase in platelet aggregation
Okay.
using the artificial sweetener. And they said this might explain why we have found previously that people are getting heart attack, stroke, death when they use these artificial sweeteners.
Okay.
This particular one.
Okay.
I think it's pretty solid
Is
evidence.
this going to change what you do?
Well, I don't know if I've ever taken in this because
Oh,
I
no.
can't, because the font on the ingredients is so small I can't read it anymore. I have to show it to my kids.
I think for me, doing all this research about artificial, I'm gonna try to go off. I'm gonna try to go off
Yeah.
artificial sweeteners, just for a couple of weeks to see if it makes a difference for me. Not that I seek it out, but I'll have a Diet Pop every now and then, which I know is not good for me. It's not a healthy choice.
No.
It's just something to drink sometimes when it's hot outside or whatever.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna try to be a little more conscious of my consumption and see if it makes a difference.
So for you,
Yes.
the can of Diet Pop
Yeah.
or the can of regular pop,
Yeah.
which one do you think is doing more harm if you drank a can?
Yeah, I don't know now, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm gonna try to not drink pop. I think that's
There you
that's
go.
kind of. I'm gonna try to drink water.
Yeah.
But
Or-
sometimes I put like artificial flavor in my water, and
Wow.
that stuff has the same thing, right? I just gotta try to be really, or maybe the lemon water that we talked about before in one of our other videos.
Yeah, it's complicated. It's complicated. Personally, I'm going to try and avoid the artificial sweeteners.
Yes.
I don't really love the taste of them anyways.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a little bit more vigilant to see if the foods or drinks I'm taking in have them in them now
Yeah.
because, like you mentioned, they're everywhere.
Yep.
But I don't think they're good for you.
No, and leave a comment if you have an addiction to an artificial sweetener, if there's one that you love, or if you've had this, please share your comments. And I think the tricky part too is that we like things that are sweet.
Yeah.
And then even if it's artificially sweet, then you learn to like things that are more and more sweet. So if you can dial back your sweetness, you can learn to appreciate things that are more naturally sweet, like things like in fruit.
You're telling me not to be so sweet?
Yes, I am telling you that. Now you know. If you like this video, please like it, subscribe to our channel.
And remember, you are in charge of your own health and how much of these chemicals you take in.
We'll see you next time.